All right, students. Thank you for being patient today. I did not want to have people come into class and potentially get hurt, especially with this incredibly harsh Rochester weather that we're having today. That said, they say that if you don't like the weather in Rochester, wait 5 minutes. So for those of you who are new to the area, welcome to Snow Country. Welcome to incredible snowstorms. Though I gotta say, this year has been probably the worst year I've seen in a long time in terms of severe weather. So, again, thank you everyone for being patient that we're doing things just a little bit different today. So, as normally, we're going to start off our day with a critical thinking question. So, you see a documentary online claiming that people in China who ate more meat were more likely to get cancer than those who ate a plant-based diet. What does this prove? Now, if you watch a documentary like this, they will probably claim that this proves that meat causes cancer. And it proves that we should be a plant-based diet. It proves that human beings should not be eating meat. Um, but from a scientific perspective, not talking about do I believe in eating meat, do I not believe in eating meat. We're not talking about, well, I like meat versus I think eating meat is cruel to animals. So we're not talking about an ideological question. We're not talking about a question in terms of is it right or wrong to eat animals. We're talking about a question purely scientific in terms of does this data prove what the documentary seems to claim that it proves? And this gets into an area of statistics that students often struggle with. So it's not just going to be a matter of opinion, it's going to be a matter of what are the facts. And let's take a look at what those are. So one thing that students have a hard time with when they first start out with statistics is the fact that correlation does not prove causation. So what is meant by meat? Are we talking about beef? Are we talking about chicken? Are we talking about pork? So we could talk about a lot of things here. Now, subjectively, I feel really good after eating a nice steak. My body feels great. Maybe it's the iron. Chicken, I feel all right. Pork, after I eat pork, I tend to feel just a little bit sick. So, subjectively, are we talking about different things when we're talking about meat? Also, what else is being eaten along with the meat? Are we talking about fries and a giant soda? Are we talking about a big bun with that thin slice of burger patty with a bunch of fillers in it? What's being eaten along with the vegetables? Are we talking about a population where you have a small bowl of rice along with your stir fry? So when we're talking about meat versus a plant-based diet, we're probably talking about totally different lifestyles. Also, are these different socioeconomic populations? Are we talking about people who eat rice versus people who eat noodles? So rice versus wheat, like what kind of grain is in their diet? What kind of grain is a major staple in the diet of people all around the world? And maybe it's not a grain, but maybe it's another type of starch like potatoes. So different parts of the world tend to eat a different starch as the base in their diet. And that could make at least as big of a difference as whether they eat meat or whether they don't eat meat. Are we talking about rich people who can afford meat and poor people who cannot? Perhaps those who eat meat live long enough to get cancer in the first place. So people who can afford to eat meat, um, maybe they're just living longer than the people who can't afford meat and are dying for other reasons. Maybe they're dying younger. So between these populations, which one is living longer? Also, are we talking about people who walk places? So are they on the farm harvesting the rice and the vegetables and then walking wherever they have to go, as people have traditionally done in many agrarian societies? And on the other hand, are we talking about a modern population that goes to the drive-through a lot? And in America, there's also an issue where people who are vegan, there tends to be this bias that people who are vegan tend to be more health conscious anyway, hence the reason they go towards the vegan diet. So if they're going towards the vegan diet because they're more health conscious, then perhaps they're doing a whole bunch of other things that are contributing to their health, regardless of whatever the impact is of having a plant-based diet. So now that we've done our critical thinking exercise, let's get into the spinal cord. The spinal cord is the connection between the brain and the peripheral nervous system, or the PNS. This is the center for reflex activity. So your spinal cord extends from your foramen magnum to your conus medullaris. And your filum terminale is a fibrous extension that anchors your spinal cord to your coccyx bone. And you can see a diagram of the spinal cord right here. I know my picture is covering it up somewhat, but we can see this in more detail when we get into our anatomylearning.com app today. So here we have a cross section of the spinal cord. As you can see, it's covered in meninges. So that's that kind of fibrous covering on the outside of the brain that we saw last week. We have the same thing here on the spinal cord. And it also contains gray matter and white matter, just like we saw in the brain. You have the spinal fluid, which circulates through and around the spinal cord. So here we have a typical neuron. You can see you've got your dendrites, you've got your cell body, you've got your axon and your terminal bulb. So a signal might go to the dendrites and then go into the cell body, and maybe there's some processing there, and then it's sent through the axon to the terminal buds to send the signal out to whoever needs to get that signal. So a nerve is a bundle of axon fibers. They deliver impulses from the central nervous system to the rest of the body. So the human body has 31 pairs of spinal nerves. You have 8 cervical, 12 thoracic, 5 lumbar, 5 sacral, and 1 coccygeal. Your cauda equina, which means horse's tail, is a group of spinal nerves at the base of the spinal cord. And you can see various parts here in the picture, and you'll see more of that in the anatomylearning.com app today. Dermatomes are areas of the skin that are supplied by a single spinal nerve. These are clinically significant because they allow sensory testing of specific spinal nerves. And you can see the dermatome map right here. So sensory nerves respond to sensations or sensory stimuli, hence the name. These carry impulses toward the brain and towards the spinal cord. Motor nerves carry impulses away from the brain and spinal cord. These deliver impulses to the muscles. Major functions of the nervous system are, we have sensory input, so your senses take the signal to your brain, or in the case of reflexes, to your spinal cord. And then there's integration. So the brain interprets or makes sense of the information, or the spinal cord might process the information. And then you have a motor output. So that's the brain sending a response. So if I have my hand on a hot stove, I am going to feel that heat. It's going to travel up my arm to my spinal cord and into my brain. My brain is going to say, hey, that's hot. I don't want my hand there. I don't want to cook my hand for lunch. So it's going to send a signal back down through my arm. See if I can get this in the camera properly. And then there's going to be a signal in my muscles to say, hey, take your hand away from that stove. And this is a way of keeping you protected. So that's the connection between a sensory nerve and a motor nerve. Sensory nerve sends the information to your brain or to your spinal cord, and a motor neuron sends the signal to activate your muscles to pull away or to do whatever the appropriate action is to do. So a spinal cord is the center for reflex activity. A reflex is a quick involuntary motor response to a stimulus. So a reflex arc, we have a nerve pathway for reflex. So the receptor detects the stimulus, the sensory neuron carries the signal to the spinal cord. And you have an integration center, which can be in the brain or spinal cord, depending on what we're talking about here. But since we're talking about reflexes, it would be the spinal cord. So then you have a motor neuron, which carries signal away from the spinal cord. and then an effector muscle, or an effector gland, which responds to the stimulus. So the doctor goes and taps the little hammer on my knee, and my leg kicks forward, and somebody says to me, "Well, what are you doing, Professor Muhs? Why did you try to kick the doctor?" And it's not that I tried to kick the doctor, it's just that this is an involuntary reflex. This is what my body is designed to do. Tap on the knee, um, knee bends, leg moves forward. So we have the reflex arc pathway. So you have the little hammer hitting the knee, you have the quadriceps muscles, cell body of the sensory neuron in the dorsal root ganglion, you have the gray matter, you have spinal cord cross section. And so basically, like I said, your knee gets hit by the little hammer, the signal is sent to your spinal cord, integration takes place, and then the signal is sent through the motor neuron to tell your leg to move forward. Now, think about why this happens. You have it here where a signal is being sent to your spinal cord and then an automatic response is given. Why not just have everything done in the brain? Well, it kind of makes sense for things to be somewhat offloaded. That way the brain doesn't have to do all the work in the world. If this is a very basic task, a very basic reaction that has to happen and it has to happen quickly, then maybe it's better for the brain not to have to deal with that information and to just kind of delegate this to the spinal cord. So it's definitely a system that makes a lot of sense. So we have some reflex tests today, which are in your packet. You'll get to learn about your patellar tendon reflex, so like the little hammer on your knee. You have biceps tendon reflex, you have Achilles tendon reflex, triceps tendon reflex, Babinski reflex, and your pupillary reflex. So your pupillary reflex is going to be like if you close your eye and you open your eye again, you're going to see that your pupil got bigger while your eye was closed, and then after you opened it and light went in, your pupil got smaller. And likewise, if the doctor or the nurse or the EMT comes and shines a light in your eye after an accident, your pupil is going to get smaller. And so, why does it do that? Well, it's to help to protect your eye. And let's go ahead and go on from there. So, our activities for today. We have online questions in the quiz section of my courses. These are going to be how you get your points for this week, as we normally do. There's a study guide and a worksheet. And you guys have been doing amazing with these, so I'm really not too worried about it. If you do have a question, feel free to send me an email or feel free to come and talk to me during office hours next week. And that might actually be easier because I'll be able to have my packet with me. I can show you what the answer is if you're really struggling, and then we can talk about it. And I think it's a lot easier to talk about things in person, to be honest. Trying to communicate over email, it seems like people do that way too much in the 21st century. And I think sometimes that just makes things more difficult. So if you really have a lot of questions and you want to come to office hours, great. If you really need to ask the question right away, go ahead and send me an email, and I'll try to respond within 2 business days, as I usually do. So you have our reflex activities, and these are some of the things we talked about. We have the little hammer, we have lights that you can shine in your eye, and we also have I was going to tell you guys for today that any plastic models around the room are fair game to examine as long as they are treated with respect and care. You're adults, you're a very good group of adults. So I trust you guys to treat the various models we have with respect. And if there's other things you want to see, if you want to see some of our specimens, that's something that please feel free to ask, and that's definitely something we can discuss. So I definitely look forward to seeing you guys all next week. I really hope this Rochester weather clears up because this has been a rather rough winter in terms of the amount of snow we got. When I was in college, I had it where 1 year RIT, it was so cold for 3 days. It was like below zero for like 3 days in a row. and you could barely be outside for more than 30 seconds. So the weather in Rochester might be tough, but there is no university in the world that I would rather be at than right here with you guys. So thank you so much for making RIT absolutely amazing. I look forward to seeing you all on Monday. And lastly, how can you talk if you haven't a brain? Oh, some people without brains do an awful lot of talking. And boy, do they ever. So, class, hope you have a good time on the quiz. And I look forward to seeing you all. Like I said, I look forward to seeing you all on Monday.